Hello, DawgNation. I am Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented by Breda Pest Management. A little bit of a wild show for us today. We are following the action of the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis. Mike Griffith on hand there for that. Hope to hear live press conference from Jalen Carter coming up in a few minutes. Always a little bit of a tricky technical thing with something like that, but we're going to give it our best effort to give you Carter here live. And there's obviously all kinds of reporting out there on Jalen Carter over the course of the last few minutes there as well, including late breaking here right now, just as we get ready to go on the air. So all of this taking place makes our show feel a little bit different, but we're going to try to do as much as we can to make this as normal a show as possible and try to have some fun in the midst of all the other stuff that's kind of going on here too. And a lot of this is just stuff we're kind of processing in real time. So we're going to do the best we can. We're going to give it our best shot, and we're glad to have you here with us for it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. It's presented by Breda Pest Management, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Breda Pest Management, the official pest control of UGA Athletics.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
All right, welcome into our program today. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. And as the voice told you there a moment ago, we're presented by Breda Pest Management. And we are in the midst of a lot of stuff here today. We're going to hopefully catch up with Mike Griffith here coming up in a few minutes. That is live from Indianapolis where the NFL Scouting Combine is taking place. Mike covering all of the Georgia players today as many of them meet with the media, talk about their Georgia careers, talk about their hopes for landing in the first round of the NFL draft in many cases. Mike's going to give us some information on that here coming up. We are also going to talk a little bit about a report at the AJC this morning, AJC.com. You may have read this, involving some information with Jalen Carter, reportedly at the scene of the traffic accident involving Chandler LaCoy and Devin Willock that cost them their lives. And this is obviously creating a little bit of, certainly a level of interest around it, including I think there's going to be some late breaking right before the show comes on news here to give you coming up here in just a moment that we'll talk about. This is actually happening live as we come on the air. So this is a little bit different for us, a little bit, kind of, this is all just kind of playing out in real time. So we're going to do our best to follow all of that. I'll also tell you this, kind of away from the Carter story here for a moment. It is worth your time to go to DawgNation. I think it's on the Facebook page right now. Hopefully we'll get this on the YouTube page here too. It is worth your time to check out some of the stuff that Nolan Smith had to say earlier today, because the workout portion of the NFL Scouting Combine begins tomorrow. Today, a lot of the figures who are there are talking to reporters. As I said before, we're going to try to talk to Jalen Carter, or hear from Jalen Carter as he speaks with the media here coming up in just a moment. But we've already heard from Nolan Smith here this morning, and away from kind of what might be the sort of bigger topic at hand for a minute, I think checking in with Nolan Smith and hearing him, I think that is certainly worth your time, because I don't know, Nolan has always come across to me as an incredibly thoughtful player. This is one of those guys that sort of, I think, is the perfect embodiment of what you kind of want a football player to be. Like on the football field, Nolan is tenacious and as aggressive and as driven, as anybody could be, right? He plays that game with the reckless abandon that you want someone to approach the football field with, and yet away from the game, whether it be sort of post-game locker room comments or things like that. He has also sort of proven himself to be kind of the ultimate gentleman there as well. And I think in some of the stuff that you got from him, in his press conference today from Indianapolis NFL Scouting Combine, you sort of saw that side of Nolan Smith again, which I just really appreciate. He was obviously very emotional in talking about what Devin Willock meant to him and what life has been like for him as a teammate of Willock's, having had to go through that. It's the kind of thing we wouldn't obviously wish on anybody. We said this yesterday because it was obviously would have been Willock's birthday, and Kirby Smart gave a very thoughtful message about all of that on social media. Connor Riley and I talked about this briefly, that eventually as a show, we just sort of pivot back to talking about what it is that we talk about. We love college football around here. We love the upcoming season, no matter what the storyline is, whether it be Georgia trying to win a third straight national championship or years ago when Georgia was trying to win its first straight national championship. We just sort of love the idea of the college football calendar and one season ending and getting ready for the new season. And eventually old habits, I guess, kind of die hard here. You just sort of get back to the business of talking about football the way that you kind of always have. And yet we are also mindful, and we said this at the time, right, in the immediate aftermath of that terrible accident a few weeks ago. We said this at the time that when we did all of those things, when we celebrated Georgia's national championship, and when we looked ahead, excited about the upcoming season the way we always do, we would also do that with the kind of parallel mindset that Georgia is in the midst of a tragedy. And there is, still horrible sadness and confusion as it relates to that, and that we would have to try to do our best somehow, some way to kind of demonstrate the kind of weird contradiction of being really, really sad and in some cases confused about what actually happened with the Devin Willock, Chandler LaCroix accident, while also just kind of being about the business of loving college football and appreciating what is, I think, for me and for many of you, our favorite pastime. And have we gotten it all right on that? I don't know. I guess you can kind of judge for yourself, but on this show, we've tried to kind of figure all of that out. And I thought that Nolan Smith, with the words that he spoke this morning, did a pretty good job of kind of articulating exactly what that, has kind of meant for him. And I used the word confusion a moment ago to also kind of talk about the Willock LaCroix, accident and the situation there with that. The AJC, Atlanta Journal-Constitution, AJC.com this morning, reporting that's going to probably reverberate a little bit in Indianapolis one way or another involving Jalen Carter. Now, this is also one of those things that really kind of comes out pretty quickly just before our show began, kind of running around in the morning. You're trying to process all of this, but you're also, kind of doing the regular stuff to get ready for the regular show as you anticipated. So, I think to get all of the details and facts on this, you're going to probably need to go read this for yourself at AJC.com. But I guess the takeaway here is that Carter was at the scene of the accident. There's an allegation in the AJC story about possible street racing with Carter and some of the other folks who were involved there. And then, also, I guess the discussion that Carter had been present in the accident, then left, and then returned back to it. So those are kind of the bigger, I guess, sort of facts that maybe come out of the AJC reporting. There is more to it than just that. As I said before, you should go read that for yourself there at AJC.com to kind of get more on that. And look, I'll be completely candid, and we'll just have a very candid conversation here for a couple of minutes. We are not structured as a show to do a whole lot of talking and discussing about investigative reporting on a fatal car accident. That's just not what we're structured to do. I think it's an important job that someone probably does that. But y'all know we're about fun and entertainment and things like that. And when things like this kind of bubble into our world, it really kind of sort of stands in the way of us doing the kind of thing that I'm paid to do and that we like doing around here, which is having a fun conversation around Georgia football. And yet when something like this happens kind of like right here involving one of the players that we talk about so much, well, you can't really ignore it either. So you have to have, some sort of conversation about this. So as of right now, and there's going to be some late breaking details I can give you here in a moment. I don't have all those facts in front of me right now, but I'm going to give those to you coming up in just a couple of minutes when I can tell you more about this. But let me give you one opinion on this for now, and then I'll give you more information as it becomes fully available to me. Here's my opinion. Right now, whatever the facts are on Jalen Carter, and whatever the facts are as it relates to Georgia football, whatever the facts are, it is better than the opinion rumor mill that's been out there. By better, I mean it leads to a more, I guess, appropriate conclusion to this story. And I'll tell you why I feel that way. The other day, I was a part of a meeting. Now, this meeting was unrelated to my employment, not anything to do with DawgNation, and unrelated to Georgia football in any form or fashion whatsoever. This is just a completely different kind of meeting than work or Georgia football or anything like that. It was just a part of a meeting. And as I walked into this meeting, or as I joined this meeting, there was a conversation going on with a couple of people about the fact that, it had been rumored that Jalen Carter had been on the scene at this accident. Many of you are aware that this rumor had existed in internet circles, text chain circles, breakfast spot circles, wherever it is that people are congregating and talking. This rumor had been out there for quite some time. And this is not, new information to NFL teams who are vetting Jalen Carter. It's not new information to a lot of people who are maybe kind of around the periphery of Georgia football here a little bit. This is one of those rumors that is out there. And so at this point in time, getting the actual facts out about whatever this is, whatever this might be, getting the actual facts out on this is, I think, at least better than sort of the murky, cloudy situation of the rumors of, I heard that so-and-so was there and I heard this, I heard that, heard that. At a certain point in time, no one is served well by rumors. And a lot of you know, if you travel in any kind of circles whatsoever, that the sort of rumor stuff related to this car accident is almost out of control. I mean, it's one of those things where you don't have to go very far to find somebody who feels like they know somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody, and everybody's talking about what supposedly happened in this car accident. Well, better to get the facts out, even if the facts aren't pleasant. Let me tell you something. I don't know that these facts, at least based on my kind of rudimentary understanding of this at the very beginning, I don't know that all these facts are pleasant. But facts better than rumors, I believe, when it comes to this here right now. Now, with all of that said, as I'm taking the air literally right now, within a couple of seconds ago, here is a statement coming out about the Athens Clark County Police Department. I'm going to try to read this, and I'm going to have to get my phone so I can. And, by the time you guys listen to the podcast, something like this is all, probably old news to you, but this is literally just happening right now. So I'm going to read the full statement because this is my first time even reading it. So what they say is ACCPD, as a result of the ongoing investigation of the January 15th, 2023 fatal car crash that occurred off Barnett Shoals Road, the Athens Clark County Police Department has secured arrest warrants for Jalen Carter for reckless driving and racing. So Carter has an arrest warrant for him right now. He is in Indianapolis for the NFL Scouting Combine. He now has an arrest warrant for reckless driving and racing. The police statement goes on to say the investigation found that Chandler LaCroix, the driver of the 2021 Ford Expedition, and Jalen Carter, the driver of a 2021 Jeep Trackhawk, were operating their vehicles in a manner consistent with racing shortly after leaving the downtown Athens area about 2:30 a.m. The evidence, I'm sorry for reading the whole thing. I'm just reading this for the first time, y'all. The evidence demonstrated that both vehicles switched between lanes, drove in the center turn lane, drove in opposite lanes of travel, overtook other motorists, and drove at high rates of speed in an apparent attempt to outdistance each other. The statement goes on to say evidence indicated that shortly before the crash, the Expedition was traveling at about 104 miles per hour. The toxicology report indicated that LaCroix's blood alcohol concentration was 0.197, which is obviously well in excess of the legal limit. At the time of the crash, investigators determined that alcohol impairment, racing, reckless driving, and speed were significant contributing factors to the crash. The case will be given to the Solicitor General's office. So this statement coming out here right around 10 a.m., shortly after the AJC story about Carter here this morning. Now, all of this is very new, and I don't know what any of this necessarily means, but obviously you don't have to be a lawyer to say this doesn't sound very good. How severe is it? How bad is it? I don't know. What does it mean for Carter in particular? What does it mean for Georgia in particular? I don't know about that. But this is one of those things at this point in time now, I sort of think you just sort of have to let all the facts come out, and the facts need to come out. This is one of those things that's not going to just sort of disappear into thin air. It's not just going to sort of go away. This is not one of those things that's just going to kind of recede into the background on the basis of time alone. This is one of those stories that I think sort of has to be followed to its conclusion. I am not smart enough to make a lot of, interpretations of this. I can't tell you what it means legally. I can't tell you what this necessarily means. It's, I'm just not, in the heat of the moment, someone who's not trained in that world, I can't necessarily tell you about that, but it is out there. It is real. It's going to be talked about. Jalen Carter is supposed to meet with the media for the first time coming up about 10 minutes. Obviously, we had planned on kind of taking that anyway because, there's a chance that Carter's the potential number 1 overall draft pick. Now that story is a little bit different because he'll almost certainly be asked about this. My guess is he'll be advised not to say too much about it, and that's probably good legal advice. Jalen Carter is no different than anybody else facing, any kind of charge. He has a right to a legal defense, and part of that legal defense is his right to limit what he says publicly. And I totally support anybody taking full advantage of every legal right they have. In this particular case, Carter's got that legal right, and I won't assume anything about him one way or another if he probably wisely chooses not to say much about this here right now. But it's out there. It's going to be discussed. This comes out right as we're beginning today's show. Certainly awkward given our normal line of thought, normal line of conversation. But unfortunately for everybody involved right now, this story seems to be getting a little bit more complicated. And so with that said, we'll get ready to begin today's show, DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Breda Pest Management. Obviously, we're happy to have you with us. Normally, very different kind of discussion here around here, and obviously we'll try to have some fun on today's show there as well. And actually, we'll just sort of try to find out what is the scene in Indianapolis like around all of this. If you're just joining us live on video, the Athens-Clarke County Police Department issuing a statement that they're issuing an arrest warrant for Jalen Carter because of Carter's alleged involvement in the automobile accident that killed Devin Willick and Chandler LaCroix. So we are following this as it happens here right now. And, of course, you join us at 9:45, 1st and 15, DawgNation.com, DawgNation app, 10 a.m. after that, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Radio Noon, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and as a podcast wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. We really appreciate that. Lots more coverage coming up from Indianapolis. We're going to try to talk to Mike Griffith here today. Mike's going to try to help us bring in and hear from Jalen Carter. We're going to try our best on this. This is obviously, it's one of those things we're just going to give it our best shot to sort of see how all of this goes. And if it doesn't quite work the way that it should, then we'll just sort of shake that off and move on to the next thing. At the very least, we should be able to hear from Mike on what Carter has to say coming up in a minute, but hopefully we'll get a chance to hear from Carter himself beyond just whatever may be going on with this, just whatever Carter's being asked. We had sort of planned on trying to give you the Jalen Carter press conference anyway. It now takes on a little bit more significance, and so we'll try even harder to bring you his words live coming up in a moment. If he does indeed meet with the media, as he's slated to do, we'll bring you that coming up here in a couple of minutes. Let me also remind you that our show today is brought to you by our friends at Breda Pest Management. Of course, Breda Pest Management, the official pest control provider of UGA Athletics. And listen, I love what they do for UGA. I love what they can do for all of you there as well. When you think about Breda, you're thinking about a company that's been in business since 1975. They got like 125 employees. You're talking about unparalleled strength in their industry. So much so they've been recognized by UGA and trusted as the official pest control provider of UGA Athletics. And what that means for you is, because you're facing, we're all kind of asking the same question. Well, what's in it for me? What do I get out of Breda being so big and so good at their job? Well, here's what you get. You're working with a termite company right now, maybe sort of fly by night, maybe, not quite as substantial in the industry. And as a way of kind of keeping up, they're having to raise your price year after year after year. It seems like right now everything's getting more expensive. You get that letter in the mail, your termite protection is going up, your pest control protection is going up. Well, when you make the switch to Breda Pest Management, those letters go away. And all of a sudden you put more money back in your pocket instantly just for making that switch. That's why I recommend Breda Pest Management, because they can do something good for you. They don't just do good stuff for UGA. They can do something good for you. And you can have the same pest control protection that Sanford Stadium has and all the other athletic venues that UGA have, and you can put more money back in your pocket just for making that switch. So find them online. It's BredaPest.com. That's BREDA, BredaPest.com, to kind of learn more about that. All right, so this is the time of the show we're going to kind of transition around the DawgHouse here for a moment. Now, we are going to come back to this Carter story and give you whatever is next on that here in a few minutes. Either Mike Griffith live from Indianapolis to discuss kind of how all this is playing up there. Carter in his own words, hopefully we'll be able to bring you that coming up in a couple of minutes. But that's probably about sort of like 5, 6, 7, maybe as much as 10 minutes away here. So we're going to kind of change the subject here for a moment and talk about something completely different, frankly, something that's far more pleasant, just for a few minutes. And then we'll give you more on the Carter situation when it comes out and when we have that for you, probably in about 5 or 10 minutes. That all makes sense? We'll get back to that here in a moment. Yesterday, once again from Indianapolis, there was a really cool moment where Brandon Staley, the Chargers coach, was talking about his love of the NFL draft. And he was on with the NFL Network guys And, they were kind of going on about how, Staley had always kind of just been sort of this draft obsessive, and he and his family would kind of always get the wings and the pizza, and they'd always be sitting around watching the draft each and every year. And so they're kind of having this sort of conversation, sort of waxing poetic about how much they love the NFL draft. But in the midst of all of that, Staley was talking about one moment in particular that he liked from last year's draft, and obviously one of the stories for the Chargers was the fact that they had selected Salyer, and there had been all this kind of controversy around Salyer's draft status. Has been a very good player for Georgia, really bedrock member of the Georgia offensive line, but sort of faced this weird level of doubt and, I don't want to say criticism, but skepticism, maybe a better way of saying that, prior to last year's draft. Obviously, the Chargers were smart enough to take him, even though they took him late. And yet, Salyer ended up being a very important player for the Chargers this season. In fact, you hear Staley in his own words talk about just how important Jamari was to the Chargers' effort. So as we kind of wait for the next thing to sort of happen in this Jalen Carter story, let me do something just more fun for a few minutes here. How about Brandon Staley from the NFL Network this week talking about Jamari Salyer? You'll like this. Here's Staley.
When those guys walk across the stage, you're seeing a dream come true right before your eyes. And then now you have access to their families, their coaches, how they made it here, and it's just amazing. And last year, my favorite story probably from my first 2 years is, we picked Jamari Salyer in the 6th round.
Great.
This guy ends up saving our season.
Yeah.
And I spoke at Kirby Smart's clinic at Georgia last year, and they had 1 million guys coming out. He does a great job. And Jamari is a guy that we really loved in the draft process. Kind of the rounds are going, and there's some stuff about some of his medical history, stuff like that, and but we love this player, and we're there, and it's getting like the 6th round. I call Kirby Smart on the phone. I'm
Directly
like, hey man, I'm like, hey Kirby, we need to talk, and and just trying to find out for Tom and JoJo, and he says, hey, Brandon, I promise you, this guy's the real deal. And sure enough, this guy, we pick him. He has a fantastic season, and we probably picked him 2 or 3 rounds too late, but
right.
Better late than never. But it was just one of those things where you're on the clock and you're trusting the relationships that you built with people, and you're getting that information in real time. And for us to go pick him, it was a great moment for the Chargers.
So once again, we're live here reacting to a lot of things here this morning. That's good stuff from Brandon Staley on the LA Chargers' decision to draft Jamari Salyer, how well that worked out for them. I want to get back to that. There's plenty more to say about that. But also, as we're doing the show here, we're continuing to follow a story that literally breaks as today's show is beginning. The Athens-Clarke County Police Department reporting they've issued an arrest warrant for Jalen Carter because of Carter's presence at the scene of the accident in which Delvin Willick and Chandler LaCroix lost their life. The official, to go back to the official wording here on this, that reckless driving and racing is the charge there that ACC Police Department pursuing against Carter. The reason why I bring that back up is because Ian Rappaport from the NFL Network reporting on Twitter here that Georgia defensive tackle Jalen Carter, who had been scheduled to speak with reporters in Indianapolis today, along with doing his physical, has not been spotted with his group this morning. He has met with teams already previous to this news. So that's Ian Rappaport on Twitter a couple moments ago. Rappaport, obviously, if you follow the NFL, one of the big kind of newsmen in that industry, reporting that Carter has not been seen. As I said before, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not certainly qualified to be giving any kind of sort of legal opinion about anything. But obviously, we know that Jalen Carter, now facing this charge, has every right to a legal defense. That legal defense oftentimes includes the right to remain silent. Carter choosing not to speak to reporters here right now is simply his legal right, and I wouldn't read much into that one way or another. But stepping away, choosing not to speak here right now, at least that's the assumption we get based on what Ian Rappaport is saying here there as well. Rappaport also saying that that Carter has met with teams already previous to this news. I'm going to make an assumption here. Maybe oftentimes assumptions end up being wrong, but here's my assumption. I told you a few minutes ago that, and listen, I don't pretend to be like Mr. Insider and plugged in, everything. That's not the game that I play necessarily. But even in me, just sort of walking around in my normal life, I've had plenty of people bring up, hey, did you hear, Jalen Carter, blah, 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 blah. This has not exactly been the most, poorly kept secret necessarily. This is a rumor that's been active. People haven't really known what's true and what's not, but this is a rumor that's been fairly active. So my assumption is if in the circles that I travel in, if people had been talking about this prior to the AJC officially reporting it this morning, this was not a surprise to NFL teams either, who, when it comes to investing, 8-figure sums of money into a potential first round, overall draft pick, are doing their own private investigations, which are very, very different than anything else that takes place in the media or takes place in courts of law. There are a lot less. There's a lot less laws governing what you can discover in a private investigation. So my guess is that this conversation may have already taken place with some of the NFL teams who may have been just as aware of this rumor as many of you were. But according to what we have here right now, Ian Rappaport reporting that Jalen Carter is not seen, at least for the moment, in Indianapolis. We may be led to assume that means that he's not going to speak with reporters either. You do see, you do see a video image right there coming from the NFL Scouting Combine. That's Brian Brzee, obviously a name that a lot of Georgia fans will remember from a recruiting standpoint and a very good player at Clemson. Hard to believe, guys, it makes you feel old to see these guys who felt like we were just talking about as recruits 6 minutes ago. All of a sudden now they're at the NFL Scouting Combine. But that is Brzee there. So we are on the scene in Indianapolis, and I guess that we will give you the sights and sounds as all of this plays out and kind of whatever comes next on this. And when we bring on Mike Griffith, this is not going to be like all Jalen Carter all the time. We'll talk to him about the other things going on with the Georgia players there, because the one thing I continue to believe is put the Carter thing aside here for a moment. We obviously have to deal with it. It's happening as we're doing the show, but to put that aside for a moment, one of the things that I do think is interesting about the NFL draft lead up for Georgia, and you probably heard me say this before, is it's the number of Georgia players who are kind of swing guys who, if everything goes well and if they perform well in some of the scouting combine stuff, the pro day stuff, or things like that, they have a way to sort of swing their way into the first round here. I would put a guy like Nolan Smith in that category. Nolan's one of those guys that he's going to hear a couple of different things. A, he's going to hear coming off of injury. B, he's going to hear about the fact that as an edge rusher, he's a little undersized. He's probably a little undersized, even for Georgia in that category. Certainly probably a little undersized when you start moving ahead to the NFL part of this. So he's going to hear some questions about his ability to actually get after quarterbacks and shed the blocks necessary to be able to do that. But Nolan's game on the field sort of speaks for itself, and there's a chance that he responds to all of those questions by showing what he's all about, and he may get a chance to be a first-round pick. I would say that Darnell Washington right now has a very good chance of being a first-round pick. We know the size that he brings to the table. We know how important as kind of you don't really think about him as being the focal point of the Georgia offense because they weren't always throwing it to him. But Kirby Smart would say that in a lot of ways, Darnell, because of what he could do as a passing game threat, but also as just a mauler in the run game, was really kind of the catalyst, part of the engine that made the Georgia offense what it was. And that film paired with what might be a very impressive testing period. Darnell, even though he's very big, he has a chance to run really well. And if he puts a big 40 time along with the obvious, measurable size that he has, that's a guy that could be in the first round of the NFL draft. Obviously, Broderick Jones is a guy that I would sort of expect to be taken in the first round. I hope that he is. Keely Ringo is a guy we talked about a couple of days ago where, on the one hand, you get the long frame, you get the incredible speed. It's almost certain that Ringo will be among the best tested defensive backs who participate in some of this, pre-draft, process stuff. I would be surprised if that's not the case. And, on the other hand, I think the word that what Daniel Jeremiah used the other day is maybe a little bit stiff. So he's got that critique to answer to. So you've got guys like Ringo and Darnell and Nolan and, to a certain extent maybe Broderick Jones there as well, who could kind of swing their way into the first round here. And then you've got the possibility that some of those guys could fall to the second round there too. So the point is, when we get a chance to talk to Mike Griffith, we're going to kind of talk about a lot of that, all of that, and then we'll also kind of deal with the Jalen Carter stuff as it's playing out. But ultimately, I would say our role on that here is just to sort of let you know that it's going on. And, how that's chosen to be interpreted, smarter people than me will probably weigh in on that. At first blush, this obviously doesn't look good, but, how bad is it? How serious is it? We'll obviously sort of find that out as a lot of this plays out. But if you want to read more of the facts that as they've been reported, also really just a short period of time before we came on the field today, came on the field. We're not on the field. We're sitting in the studio. You don't want me on the field. Before we came on in the studio today, AJC.com for a lot more on that. So have we made contact with Mike? Do we know what his plan is, what he's got going on? Okay. All right. Perfect. So our story is, what is it right now? It's about 10:30. So our story here is that the official time slot for Carter's coming up in a moment. We're going to wait and see if he does occupy that time slot. And if he doesn't, we certainly understand why he might not. But if he doesn't, then Mike's going to pop on with us around that. We told you we're going to be a little bit loose today and just sort of kind of figure this out and play it all out as it plays out. And good information from our producer, Michael Carvel, making us aware of all of that. So what do you say we do this? Let me go back now. If you remember a few minutes ago, prior to the Rappaport statement about Jalen Carter, I had mentioned to you the Brandon Staley audio talking about Jamari Salyer. I thought that was really good. And to me, it sort of speaks to a couple of things here. I don't have some grand point to necessarily make about this, but there are a couple of things I do like about that a little bit. First of all, I love the statement that, according to Staley, Salyer sort of saved their season. And if you follow the NFL, if if you kind of watch that closely, when Salyer did step on, kind of late portion of the year, I mean, he did become a real force to that offensive line, immediately earned praise. And frankly, I think rightly so. I've told many of you this in the past. I am not a huge fan of the pre-draft process when we're nitpicking players who are obviously good in college. I don't just mean that about Georgia players. I mean that about, a lot of players. This is one of those things where, to me, if you have proven yourself to be good at the highest level of college football, I sort of don't really care what your hand size is. I don't really care about, medical rumors necessarily, things like that. If you're playing well on the football field, that's sort of all I really need to know. And as I said, I feel that way about anybody, non-Georgia players, other SEC players, whatever else. But certainly in the case of Jamari Salyer, who we'd all seen, very up close and personal with our own eyes, we had certainly seen, how valuable he had been for UGA. So we thought it was really pretty weird that he was dropping in the draft as much as he did, all the way to the sixth round, near the end of the NFL draft that Salyer finally got taken. Chargers looked smart for taking him, but in the case of Staley right there, you also hear him saying, hey, we weren't that smart either. We probably took him a couple of rounds too late ourselves. So in other words, he says, don't take us off the hook on this either, because we had many chances prior to this to take him, and we probably waited too long to do that there as well. So I thought all that was really good from Staley. I also like the fact that in the midst of that clip, you hear Staley in his own words describing the way in which Kirby Smart really kind of went to bat for Jamari Salyer here. And this is one of the things that you sort of hope all coaches do for their guys. They become a real advocate for them when it comes to this kind of thing. And you hope that you're the kind of coach that has the kind of credibility that can earn some trust for yourself and for the player that you're advocating for, including in the case of Kirby Smart. That would seem to be the case, but really sort of stepping up and supporting that Jamari Salyer is the kind of guy that you shouldn't have any questions about. Whatever medical stuff is going on, you think Georgia takes that kind of stuff lightly? You think Georgia doesn't take that kind of stuff seriously? Of course it pays due respect to all that. Of course it's watching that kind of stuff closely, and the Chargers look very smart right now for having Jamari Salyer on their team. Beyond all of that, though, I think it's also kind of interesting to see the potential parallel that exists where, hey, Staley says, hey, Salyer arriving here, that was a season saver for us. Salyer arriving here, stepping in, becoming a starter for us, that kind of held things together for us. I think it's easy to see the parallels on that for Georgia a little bit too, because you'll remember, as it involves Jamari Salyer in the national championship game of 2021, Salyer, who had been the offensive tackle for Georgia, kind of kicked inside, played a little bit of guard because Georgia needed some help in the interior of that offensive line in that game against Alabama. Broderick Jones stepped in at the left tackle spot, and much like Salyer became, to use Staley's words, the season savior for the Chargers, I think Broderick Jones, when he stepped in that game for Georgia against Alabama at the end of the 2021 season, kind of became a championship saver for Georgia, and he gave Georgia a chance to preserve its opportunity to win the national championship. And then everything that sort of happened after that kind of felt like it was sort of an offshoot or maybe a falling domino that had started with the decision to put Broderick Jones in that game there at that particular time. And then you kind of look ahead to, and I think we talked about this maybe a little bit yesterday. I feel like we've talked about this at some point in time. There's also the kind of potential parallel here of what could happen for Georgia again this year as well, where last year at the end of the season, it's Warren McClendon who was battling injury, and McClendon was able to start, and Amarius Mims stepped in for you a couple of times in the college football playoff, and every indication that we have is that Amarius Mims played really very well in that situation, the Peach Bowl, and that situation in the national championship game, that Mims gave Georgia a terrific effort, and it's not difficult to kind of draw that parallel to say, oh, well, what Mims does in this spot is similar to what Broderick Jones had done for Georgia a year ago, and that Mims maybe was his own version, a little bit of a season saver for Georgia, because all of a sudden you didn't have to worry about what you were offensively without Warren McClendon in the game. You had an incredible prospect, the likes of Amarius Mims, who you had held on to and prevented from transferring this past offseason. You held on to him, you put him in that spot, and then he had a chance to give you a chance to go back and win the national championship. And so with all of that said, Mims going to be in a pretty big spotlight for Georgia here this season there as well. But when you hear the draft conversation that's been going on around Broderick Jones, you're reminded of just how big of the shoes a guy like Amarius Mims has to fill, or Ernest Green, who also may step up into at least we were making that assumption here for the moment, might step up into a starting situation for Georgia this year. Once again, to sort of step up and kind of be what Broderick Jones has been, what others have been, what Jamari Salyer once was, the kind of guy that preserves a chance at a championship season for Georgia. Those are not easy shoes to fill. That is not an easy transition to make, even if Broderick Jones and guys like that have made it look easy in the past. But to go back to the original point here, nice to see a former Dog like Jamari Salyer, who everybody liked and everybody respected while he was at UGA, getting the attention that he deserves. We'll make that around the DawgHouse here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management here today. So that is the scene from the NFL Scouting Combine. Everybody's waiting. If Rappaport is reporting that Carter hasn't been seen, my assumption is he's not popping up here for this, and I don't think it should be treated as a scandal if he does. Now, the legal stuff that's going on, that's for somebody else to determine, what ends up being on that. But in the immediate aftermath of this warrant coming out from the Athens-Clarke County Police Department, the immediate aftermath of that, if Carter thinks best of speaking here right now, I won't interpret too much about that one way or another, but we are following that. And if you're just joining us on video, obviously if you're a podcast, you've probably been with us for the entire time. But if you're just joining us on video, the AJC had a report this morning at AJC.com about Jalen Carter being present at the automobile accident that ultimately cost Devin Willick and Chandler LaCroix their lives. The allegation from the story involved street racing, at least an allegation of street racing. There's also some discussion of Carter being present, leaving the scene of the accident, then returning. So shortly after the AJC story, you had a statement coming out from the Athens-Clarke County Police Department where there's some toxicology information that I don't believe previously had been available anywhere. That was released by them, and an arrest warrant for Jalen Carter. So those are the facts. We're kind of following that. We're not going to be all this all the time, but we're also not going to pretend this doesn't exist either. ESPN now also kind of in on that story there as well about some of the national folks starting to kind of pick this up a little bit there too. And you got a lot of folks on the scene there at the NFL Combine. We can probably assume this is not going to happen, and then we'll just sort of see how it plays out from right there. So we'll hope to catch up with Mike Griffith here in a moment. What do you say for now on DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management? Sort of bring some other conversation back into this while we kind of wait for all of this to play out. Let's get ready to go cruise around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean and talk about some of the other draft conversation currently taking place around former SEC names.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
All right, we'll be cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Of course, days like this make me wish I was still on a Royal Caribbean cruise when you're kind of dealing with some of the craziness that's out there here right now. But the good news for you is that you can do what I just did. You can take your own Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. I was on Wonder of the Seas. Wonder of the Seas is the largest cruise ship in the world. And one of the things I love about a big cruise ship like that, the 7-night sailing on the big cruise ship is the ship sort of divided into neighborhoods. And there are all these cool sort of places to visit that, and I talked to my kids about this, my wife about this, you almost forget you're on a cruise ship because of how cool some of the areas that you're exploring are. There's what they call the Royal Promenade, which is kind of on deck 5 of the ship, and you've got restaurants and bars and shopping experiences. You're sort of walking through. It almost looks like a really nice shopping mall. You're sort of walking through that part. It's a big, long promenade hallway that stretches from one end of the ship to the other. But you've also got what they call the Central Park area, which is really, really nice. You have this real living foliage, and you're kind of walking through that's very quiet and quaint. In the evening, there'll be all kinds of fun, entertaining stuff going on other places, but Central Park always has this very pleasant, quiet, sophisticated feel almost, and that's really fun too. There's the boardwalk, where there's like a carousel, and there's great sports bar, Playmaker Sports Bar and Grill. There's the Aqua Theater, where you have some great shows. You have all of this going on, and it takes about 7 days to explore it. In fact, even after 7 days, I still don't feel like I quite got to see everything there is to be seen on a ship like this, and I was trying my best to sort of soak it all in, and you still don't feel like you got to do it all, or you got to do it all as much as you want to, which is only an invitation to go back and take another Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. So Jessica Slater is the one we trust for all this. Great travel agent. We had one of our commenters earlier on DawgNation.com saying he took a cruise like in 2005, and Jessica was his travel agent then. I had no idea that Jessica had been in the game quite so long, but nonetheless, Jessica doing good stuff for you. You can give her a call, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also visit royaldogs.com for more on that today. That is royaldogs.com. You can find out about all the stuff that Jessica's got going on with Royal Caribbean, but also our Dog Nation cruise coming up in April. You have a chance to be a part of that, and I think you're going to really, really enjoy it, so make sure you check that out then. All right, so with that said, let's get ready to go cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean here today. And I continue to see what I think is pretty interesting as it relates to some chatter around Bryce Young, the fact that Bryce Young's just not very big. And, Mel Kiper still has him going number 1 overall, the former Alabama quarterback. But there are a lot of people going to want to hold his size against him. And obviously we've seen this with Stetson, too. But Young, as the former Heisman Trophy winner and a guy that sort of mentioned the sort of top NFL draft, Young's going to be compared to guys like Anthony Richardson or Will Levis, guys that we also know very well here in the SEC, that just sort of have better measurables. Look, as I said before, this is not, for me, a philosophy that I have exclusively for former Georgia guys. I sort of view this across the board. If you take Anthony Richardson or Will Levis over Bryce Young, then you ought to be examined. I mean, you ought to be put under, a examination to sort of find out what you've got going on between the ears. How many times did we see Bryce Young play good football? And listen, we're a Georgia show. We don't like Alabama. I like making fun of Alabama, but we're also not incapable of being objective. And objectively speaking, I think that Bryce Young is a very good football player. Objectively speaking, I think that Anthony Richardson's no better than average. I don't care if he runs a 3.5 40. I don't care if he throws the ball over the mountains. Anthony Richardson's just not that good of a football player. He's just not. He looks like he should be, but he's always looked like he should be, and he never has been. At a certain point in time, what you think should be true has to conflict with what actually is true, and Anthony Richardson's just not that good. In the case of Will Levis, I sort of feel the same way. Yeah, Will Levis can throw the ball through a brick wall. That's awesome. I'm not quite so sure what that has added up to over the course of his college career, because go back to 2021. Kentucky was not without offensive weapons. They had the Wandale Robinson kid. You had Liam Cohen working with the offense. It is not like this Kentucky team in 2021 was absent of opportunity for offensive success. And to my knowledge, it was pretty good. I mean, it was better than Kentucky normally is, but was it actually good? Will Levis was the quarterback in that game in Athens in 2021, the one that the tight ends coach thought they should have won. But nonetheless, when you were watching that game, where at any point in time you sitting there biting your fingernails saying, oh gosh, the future number 1 overall pick is a quarterback here. He may lead this Kentucky team on some great comeback charge. Of course you didn't. Of course you didn't feel that way. Every time you played Alabama, did Bryce Young have the full measure of your respect? He better have. And listen, I hate Alabama, and I like making fun of Alabama for excuses and all that kind of stuff. But you better believe if Bryce Young had the football in his hands, he had my respect. And you better believe if Bryce Young had the football, even when Georgia was up, by the way, 15, with about a minute to go in that game, I was still very glad when, was it Robert Beal that got the last sack, or was it Nolan Smith? Whoever got the I was still very glad to see Bryce Young on the ground at the end of that game, at the end of the 2021 season, because I just think that Bryce Young's a very good football player, and I don't want to leave him with any chance to do anything to my team. And yeah, a guy like C.J. Stroud played pretty well against Georgia here this year, but for my money, I'll still take, and my draft analysis probably isn't worth 10 cents, but I still, if it's left to make an assumption about, I'll make the assumption the guy Bryce Young, who has been good throughout his college career, is better than guys like Anthony Richardson, better than guys like Will Levis, and for my money, probably better than C.J. Stroud there as well, at least on the course of the full consistency of his career when he was healthy. Not that big, I get that, but at a certain point in time, at a certain point in time, I think these NFL talent evaluators are a little bit too much in love with their own evaluation. By the way, speaking of Mel Kiper, I believe this is mock draft 2.0 for Kiper, and Kiper's only got 3 Georgia guys in the first round here for right now. He does have Jalen Carter going number 4 overall. We will see how some of the stuff that's coming out today impacts Carter's draft status. I'm going to be honest with you. Ultimately, there are far more important questions to be asked about this situation beyond what does it mean for Jalen Carter in the NFL draft. I think that's probably important to know. But at the same time, people are going to have some curiosity about what this means for him in the draft. And I would say it's probably too early to tell. But interesting to note that that Kiper's only got him going number 4 overall before all of this. And then at the back end of the first round, he's got Darnell Washington going number 29, Broderick Jones going number 31. Now, I'll tell you what I think about it. Interesting about that. Some of y'all follow this draft stuff a little bit more than I do. 31 on Broderick's a little low, right? I mean, hasn't he been projected a little higher than that by a lot of these mock drafts? I mean, if you're 31, you're obviously teetering on the brink of kind of falling out. And I have been under the assumption that Broderick Jones was a rock solid number 1 draft pick type guy, not number 1 overall, but very easy first round pick type guy. But in the case of Kiper here, he's got him kind of teetering on the brink there. So maybe in the conversation that I had a little earlier, where I was talking about swing prospects for Georgia, Ringo, who Kiper does not have in his first round, and Nolan Smith, who also Kiper does not have here in his first round. Maybe in the midst of all of that, maybe you do have to include Broderick Jones as one of those swing prospects there as well, a guy that Georgia fans will probably be rooting for to be in the first round. But at least on the basis of this mock draft, if you take it seriously or not, on the basis of this mock draft, might have that chance to kind of swing out of that there as well. So Kiper's got 3. I would say that Georgia has a chance to have more than that, but I think that 3 is a good over-under total. I'd say that I think that 3 is a pretty good, maybe 3.5. I would say 3.5 is a pretty good spot. I was actually talking to one of the big bosses around here about that yesterday. I'd probably set the over-under around 3.5. For Georgia in terms of who gets selected where and who gets selected what when it comes to the NFL draft. The Kiper stuff here kind of sort of helps paint that picture for a little bit too. We'll make that cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. How we doing on Mike Griffith? Is he still photographing empty podium? Yep, still is. There you go. Empty podium still being photographed. I think at this point in time we can go ahead and call that. But if he wants to keep photographing the podium, we'll let him do it. So let me instead, on a day like this, boy, isn't it nice to think about having a little cocktail. For those of you that like cocktails, maybe you like ready-to-drink cocktails that come right out of the can. You see these cans, you think it's a beer, right? You're conditioned over the course of your life to think the beer comes in a can. You see somebody holding a nice tasty beverage in a can in their hand, you assume they must be drinking a beer. But when it comes to Finnish long drink, you could not be more wrong, because the Finnish long drink is a mixed drink in a can. It's a kind of a really cool category of beverage called a ready-to-drink cocktail. And if you like say, gin with grapefruit juice or gin with cranberry juice or something along those lines, you're going to love the Finnish long drink. In fact, here's what I think you should do. You should go to thelongdrink.com. And boy, if I could dive face first into one right now, you better believe I would. If you could go to the longdrink.com, you can find out about all the various Finnish long drink varieties. I said before, you got the cranberry. Pretty much everybody in my neighborhood loves that around the pool. And obviously this time of year, you start thinking about when you can be back in the pool again. Long drink strong, 8.5% alcohol by volume. Long drink zero, no carbs, no sugar. Long drink traditional, it's in the blue can. It's got the grapefruit flavor. It's got the gin kick. All of that is just really good. You get all of that with our friends at the Finnish Long Drink. And listen, around where I live, it's a lot of golf courses. It's a really fun, beverage to enjoy in the golf course, but it's also like beverage stores, bars, everything else. You can try the Finnish Long Drink today. And by the way, on Friday, we'll see as a part of our Big Finish presented by the Finnish Long Drink, and we'll celebrate you enjoying yourself some Finnish Long Drink. So make sure you pick it up, try and enjoy it if you have not today. All right, so it's DawgNation Daily presented by Breda Pest Management. We continue to bring you live coverage of an empty podium in Indianapolis, where we got the camera locked in on the empty podium. I don't think that scene's going to change anytime soon, but nonetheless, the empty podium is present. So What do you say we do this? I'm going to move on. We'll kind of wrap up the show. Podcast folks, if we catch up with Mike, we'll kind of tack this onto the podcast. We'll see if we can kind of piece all this back together. But for now, we'll kind of sign off on the show here today. We'll take some comments via video, and hopefully we'll be able to come back tomorrow and do a show that's a little bit more in keeping with what we typically do here on our program. All right, as we wrap up, our buddy Ryan Walker, always really, really good, talented Facebook contributor, and a pretty prolific Photoshop type guy there as well. And in fact, let's give him a golden shoe for today. He says, well, BA, they're throwing away the posters and the excuse from the 2022 season. He's talking about Nick Saban, Alabama. He says, I enjoyed that show, and let's get another show here in 2023. He says, 3-peat on deck for the Dogs. And he says, I've got my tickets for the Nick Saban Excuse Tour, featuring all his hits from his newest album, including Rebuilding Year and 2 Receivers Down. And he's got a picture of Saban there as a musician. What that brings to mind for me is, and we've done this video for you a few times, and it never gets old for me. I don't have it to show for you today. There's that one musician out there, and some of y'all know who it is. It looks just like Nick Saban. In fact, if you Google search musician who looks like Nick Saban, you can see this for yourself. It's really funny to watch this guy like just, going in and digging in on the guitar. So that's what I thought about when Ryan sent that to me. But nonetheless, we'll give Ryan a golden shoe for today, and that's probably worth a Google search for you if you want to look that up for yourself. I wish I had to play for you. I do not, but here's what I do have. Lousy, stinking Gators. Let me tell you something. 241 days from right now, Georgia will be back in Jacksonville. Who knows? Maybe the last cocktail party of them all. If it is, we're going to go out in style with another beatdown of those lousy, stinking Gators. That happens 241 days from right now. It is DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management. We'll see you back here again tomorrow. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. One more time just for fun. Can we see the empty podium? One more time just for fun. We're still recording the empty podium. There it is. That's the empty podium. There you go. The empty podium on display. And we're going to continue to watch the empty podium here on the show, I guess. I'm not making light of the situation. It's a serious situation. But at a certain point in time, what are you going to do? All right, let me pop in here and get some more comments. And we will see how folks are doing here today and kind of what is what with everything that is going on. All right. I don't want to do side-by-side on the I mean, listen. I am tempted to do side-by-side with the empty podium. We may just check back. We may check back in with the empty podium here in a little bit. But at this point in time, I feel like the empty podium is going to stay empty. G. Grace Bama Boy says that Stetson Bennett's better than Will Levis and Anthony Richardson. So obviously G. Grace is an Alabama fan, so you take those words seriously. But the truth is like Stetson Bennett outplayed Levis in 2021. 2022 is kind of a mess. The bad weather, I'm not sure either quarterback played particularly well. But, Stetson outplayed Levis. Now, Levis is playing against the Georgia defense, so that's a little bit of a caveat there. And, like, in the case of Richardson, at a certain point in time, I don't care what a guy looks like. Eventually, you're either good or you're not. And I just haven't seen Anthony Richardson be good. I haven't. Let's see what else. Paul Moon says, we all said that Stetson looked as tall or taller than Bryce Young, but was listed as shorter. Is that official? Is that listing out there right now? B2B visor. You gotta understand something. I know y'all like going against G, but G Grace has been with us since the SEC Country days. So I realize y'all love going against G Grace, and he loves stirring it up with y'all. But G Grace has been with us now for a good number of years. Memphis Dog says, am I worried about being upstaged by an empty podium? Maybe so. Fred Gunn says Stetson Bennett has nothing more to prove on the field. Levis and Richardson have much more to prove. I think that's true. I think that is true. I also sort of understand why guys with good tools are attractive. I do understand that. If I'm a good football coach, I probably have a little bit of an ego. And if I see Levis, the big arm, if I see Richardson, who has the big arm and the athleticism, well, of course, I think I can get something out of these guys. Of course I can. I'm sorry, as a coach, of course, I assume that I can get something out of them. That's just, you understand that. You understand, kind of where that comes from. But it's one thing to be like, oh, I'm attracted to this prospect. I'm enamored by this prospect. But, y'all, if you take a quarterback 8th overall, 4th overall, something like that, That's not a prospect. That's a guy that you are forced to build your franchise around. And I honestly don't know how you sell that. I really don't. And I know full well that if I had been saying the same thing about Josh Allen a few years ago, I would have turned out to be wrong, because somewhere, it's pre-DawgNation Daily, I guess, but somewhere I was saying, was it pre-DawgNation Daily? I can't remember. I mean, I probably was laughing at the idea of Josh Allen, who was not good at Wyoming. He was not a good football player at Wyoming, being, a kind of a franchise-level quarterback for the Buffalo Bills. Clearly he is. I think that even Daniel Jones has turned out to be better with the Giants than I would have assumed he would have been, based on the fact that he just wasn't very good at Duke. So there is some counterfactuals to what I'm saying here right now, that there are bad college quarterbacks who turn out to be good in the NFL. Even still, I don't want to draft one. If I was an NFL GM, my rule would be we're only drafting players who are good in college. Like, that'd be my first rule. We're only drafting players who are good in college. We may not always get it right, but it's about what story you want to tell yourself when you get it wrong. And that's a story I'm much more comfortable telling myself. Memphis Dog says AR-15 might be worth more of an experiment around round 4. Yeah, maybe so. I mean, as I said before, if you have a chance to kind of, get involved with those kind of tools, well, of course you'd want to. But to build your franchise around that, somebody that couldn't even lead Florida to a bowl game, no. Not just no, heck no. Not just no, heck no. Let's see what else. Enrique Isidero, I think he brings up a good point, or at least I understand the point he's making. He says the NFL is like Hollywood. You're sort of looking like sort of central casting as opposed to, actual production. And in some cases, I think that ends up being true. I do think that's true. Let's see what else. Cassie Turner says, I think the problem with Stetson is he's called too small and they're actually the same height. Yeah, I mean, look, I think the thing that Stetson's kind of got going for him here is the Brock Purdy thing, right? I mean, Purdy kind of shows you that it may be possibly more than one kind of quarterback and do well at the NFL level. But I'm going to try to see if I can say this in a way that, kind of makes at least some sense. I'm a huge fan of Stetson Bennett, A lot of you know that. I've been a very pro-Bennett guy for really the entirety of the time he's been a starting quarterback at Georgia. However, a lot of the NFL stuff related to Stetson Bennett is kind of happening a little bit fast for me. In other words, last year, most of us were content to say, hey, Stetson may not be much of an NFL quarterback, but man, he's getting the job done in college, and that's maybe good enough. And all of a sudden, 1 year later, now some people are trying to push the idea, well, maybe Stetson Bennett should be considered early in the NFL draft. Maybe he should be. I'm not saying that he shouldn't be. I'm just saying that's a very, very aggressive upgrade. Now, you say, well, it's based on some big performances of big games, so maybe that's a good reason for all of that. But a lot of that's happening, pretty fast for me. I hear some noise. Is Mike ready to go? Okay, so Mike Griffith, fresh off reporting on the empty podium, joins us here live from Indianapolis. Mike, what is the scene there like right now? And for the people who are just joining us, let me just kind of remind folks of the facts here. AJC.com report this morning, Jalen Carter present at the accident in which Devin Willock, Chandler McCrory lost their life. This, a few minutes later, I don't want to say it results in, but in the aftermath of this, the Athens-Clarke County Police released a statement. They've issued an arrest warrant now for Jalen Carter. Carter not spotted, I don't believe, at the NFL Scouting Combine today at all. So what's the scene in Indianapolis like right now with that mic?
Yeah, Brandon, we got conflicting reports. We had an NFL person tell us that there was some medical testing going on, and that's why Jalen Carter hadn't come out yet. Then we had another source tell us that he's already gone back down to Athens. So as you can imagine, somewhat havoc here. Not really anyone doing a good job telling us what's going on. Nobody really said, hey, he's not coming out to speak. So obviously we didn't want to shut the camera down until we felt fairly confident that Jalen wasn't going to want to speak today. We were hoping to bring him live to our DawgNation audience this morning. Already Nolan Smith and Robert Beal, we have those Facebook live streamed up on our DawgNation page right now. But as for Jalen Carter, the news is stunning and shocking. The timing is probably interesting to say the least. The day that he's supposed to speak at the NFL Combine, all this tragic news comes out and regrettable details of his potential. The fact that the report states that he was there on site.
Yeah, so obviously there's a lot more facts that kind of come out about this at some point in time. I don't read a ton into his decision not to speak today. I mean, I think that Jalen Carter, whatever he's charged with, whatever he might, be guilty of doing, I think he has a right to a legal defense. I think the right to a legal defense includes the right not to say anything. So Carter not speaking right now. Now, it's frustrating for you because you're in Indianapolis, and it's maybe frustrating for those who just want more information on the situation. But I think it's fair to point out that Carter is well within his legal rights not to speak about this at all right now.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, he's facing 2 misdemeanor charges, and there's reportedly a warrant out for his arrest on the biggest job interview of his life. The day that he's dreamed of, his opportunity to meet with NFL teams and play professional football. I mean, the guy's been working his whole life for this, and the timing is, again, regrettable. But at the same time, I don't think this is probably news.
Yeah.
If there was a level of involvement, Brandon, then he probably knew he was there and probably had plenty of time to come forward and tell the authorities, hey, I was there. You probably ought to know this. And I'm not saying that he did or didn't. I'm just saying that, this is something that's been under investigation for some time, and more details have come out. It's not like everyone was just transparent right up front and said, hey, here's everything that happened. The police had to do their jobs, and I know there was some controversy about the level of reporting and investigating, but now I think you can see that sometimes that's warranted when things aren't completely transparent. Now, for a Georgia football fan, obviously regrettable, disappointing that Jalen Carter, a potential number 1 overall draft pick, was at the scene in whatever form he's being charged with. What did you say? The charge were reckless driving or something? That tells me there had to be a witness or two. Obviously, that's disappointing to think that in any circumstance that a student athlete would put themselves at risk at that time of night in that situation. But, what's happened has happened, and now it'll be dealt with. As you said, Brandon, he has a right to his defense. It will be interesting to see if or how it affects his NFL draft stock. I'm here reporting on the combine, and sometimes those wires intersect with off-field issues. This is one of those times, and just trying to do the best we can to give people information and perspective on it today.
You look great, by the way. Sharp signal, nice and tan. Very impressed by all that. Let me
thank you.
Let me also, there's like one level of speculation I'm willing to do, and obviously speculation is dangerous when it comes to anything like this, but the one degree of speculation I'm sort of willing to make is, I said this earlier today, Mike, that to me, this story had sort of existed in the rumor mill in some form or fashion for a little while here. The assumption I might be willing to make is I don't think this necessarily catches NFL teams off guard in terms of their deliberations around Carter. My guess is he's already interviewed with NFL teams. Ian Rappaport has reported that. If I had to guess, I believe Carter's probably already been asked about this incident just because of the fact that this has been a rumor that's been out there. And I said this before you joined us, that to me, the facts, whatever they are at least better than the kind of murky rumor. Did you hear about so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so? The facts, as we understand them right now, frankly, don't sound all that pleasant, but it's at least a little bit more tangible reporting to kind of hush up some of the rumor mill stuff. NFL teams do their own investigations. My guess is that Carter may have already talked about this with some NFL teams, even if it's only kind of just now being publicly made known by the official sort of news channels.
Yeah, I think you're right in saying that. I think you feel comfortable saying that. Earlier today, when Nolan Smith was asked about Devin Willock, and again, for those people, we have a story up on DawgNation.com about just some incredible things Nolan Smith said today. I mean, he's always been a great interview, Brandon, but I mean, this was masterpiece theater from the NFL Combine in terms of the passion, the energy, and emotion. As Nolan Smith broke down crying in front of our eyes, talking about Devin Willock publicly for the first time, and then said, he said, I cried when the Cincinnati Bengals asked me about this. I mean, that's my brother. And obviously he was asked about Jalen Carter and defended him fervently and telling us what kind of a great teammate Jalen is and how misunderstood he is. But Nolan's testimony, getting his nose broken in the first practice and bleeding and putting a tampon in his nose, you're going, oh my gosh, this is, pretty graphic, but this is pretty real. I mean, this is, to me, the NFL Combine is when the rubber meets the mat, so to speak. I mean, when these kids talk and they really come unplugged, and you really, as kids, young men, when they really come unplugged and you really find out who and what they're all about, and that emotion when they talk about Georgia. And you can imagine what this offseason is going to be like. Nolan Smith saying, do it for Dev. That's what he's telling the Georgia guys right now. Number 77. I mean, one of the things you and I have talked about already is, my goodness, if there's a three-peat, where do they find their motivation? They can't say nobody believes in them anymore. They're going to be a preseason number one. And it would seem this unfortunate tragedy with Devin Willock is really rallying the troops, so to speak, as they rally around their teammate. That connectedness kicking in. And again, Nolan Smith and the video that we have up on our YouTube page or on DawgNation.com within the story, just so stirring. And again, one of the things you get from the NFL Combine is it gets really real here. They're not worried about what Coach Smart's going to say. They're not all, standing up there talking like robots like they do all season, everybody not wanting to give any bulletin board material. When these guys talk here, it's them. It's their brand. It's their personification of who they are and how they really want to represent themselves. They don't have to worry about carrying that program banner. And so the NFL Combine, fascinating. We'll have more interviews tomorrow, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 3 dogs scheduled each day, hoping that all of them show up. It's disappointing that Jalen didn't speak today, but as you stated, Brandon, well within his rights and certainly understandable if there is indeed a warrant out for his arrest in Georgia.
So let me kind of finish up away from that topic for a moment, because I think that obviously everything that you said that on that was kind of spot on. But the narrative to me around Georgia in this draft is I find it to be interesting how many kind of swing prospects there sort of are. Keely Ringo could be a first-round pick, or maybe he's not. Nolan Smith could be a first-round pick, maybe he's not. Darnell Washington could be a first-round pick. If he runs well, probably is. But maybe he's not. And to me, Broderick Jones probably is the safest of the names that I'm mentioning here, but Mel Kiper only had him at number 31 in his recent mock draft too, if you take that seriously at all. I'm a Georgia fan, Mike. I'm just sort of rooting for these guys to make it in the first round just because I think it's fun if they do. But from a football standpoint, this is good TV drama right here, right? To kind of see who performs well, to see who actually gets that nod. We had 5 dogs called a year ago. To kind of see how many of these guys kind of get called again this year. I got to tell you, this makes for a pretty fun pre-draft process, I think.
Absolutely. And I'll say this, Brandon, even if, regardless of if Jalen Carter's charges remain misdemeanor, there's no way he's going out of the first round. So we're strictly talking football now. I'm going to, not mention anything, and don't want to seem insensitive, but we're talking strictly football and draft stock. That's where this question is going. Jalen Carter is a first-round talent. No way he drops out of the first round, short of more serious charges emerging. Broderick Jones, I feel, is very safely a first-round pick. I think Broderick is going to be one of the guys that makes great gains at the Combine. His athleticism, when he speaks, he's very articulate. Obviously, when he interviews with the NFL teams, what they say to the media is a nice preview and representation of what the teams are getting behind the curtain. So I think Broderick Jones safely in the first round. I believe Darnell Washington is going to be an emerging story from here. It's one thing to look on paper and see 6'7.5", 285. It's another when it's right in front of your face. And Darnell is so special. I think he's going to have a good combine. I would say that he's probably my odds-on favorite as a third first-round pick. And then you got a couple of guys that as you mentioned, there's a lot of talk and speculation about. Nolan Smith spoke today. He's going to do field drills here. He's not going to do any of the testing. Remember, he had that surgery for a torn pectoral muscle on November 1st that he suffered in the Florida game, the 8th game of the season. Not really sure when he's going to be all in. The medical portion of this combine, the most important thing for Nolan is what those team doctors think when they're tugging and pulling on him and putting him through the x-ray machine, which they've already done here. So Nolan, a potential first-round pick, I would probably lean towards early second because of the injury. Keely Ringo, another guy. We know he's going to work out well here, but how well? Is it a 4.39? Is it a 4.32? 6'1", 210, 6'1", 200. People love his size, metric, speed. And even though you turn on the film and you can see Keely getting burned every now and then, and maybe the hips aren't quite as fluid as you'd like, you look down at those numbers and you go, man, 6'1", 200, and this kid runs a 4.3, whatever, we can coach him up, right? So that's always the sliding scale. Those combine numbers kind of, maybe it wasn't that bad on film, right? So those to me are the potential first-round picks. You go to the second-day guys, you're looking at Kenny McIntosh and Chris Smith, I think. The number that Kenny runs is going to be important. We saw Zamir White and James Cook last year. I believe one ran a 4.40, one ran a 4.41. If Kenny can stay under that 4.45 number, Brandon, I don't think there's any way he falls out of the second round. Could go early second round. There's a lot of teams looking for running backs. It is a competitive running back draft with Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson, but how early will Kenny go among those running backs? Big Chris Smith. Now, the size is what bothers teams. 188. What is he going to come in at? What is he going to run? Could Chris sneak into the second round? We saw the great plays, the intangibles. Maybe a third round guy, maybe a late second. And then, of course, and then the rest, right? Warren McClendon, Stetson Bennett, Robert Beal, Jack Podlesny, Kieris Jackson. There's a lot of dogs that are going to be drafted, and certainly all of them will end up in training camps of those 12 guys that you saw that are on that list for here at the NFL Combine. And Stetson, by the way, he doesn't speak until Friday. And we'll see if we set up the camera Friday for DawgNation Daily, Brandon. Let's hope that Stetson shows up for his interview. Maybe we can stream that one to the audience.
On a more serious note, Mike, this just coming out within the last couple of seconds. I want to read this to you, give you a chance to respond. We are getting a statement from Kirby Smart on the aftermath of Jalen Carter having an arrest warrant issued for him by the Athens-Clarke County Police Department around 10 a.m. this morning. Smart saying the charges announced today are deeply concerning, especially as we are still struggling to cope with the devastating loss of two beloved members of our community. We will continue to cooperate fully with the authorities while supporting these families and assessing what we can learn from this horrible tragedy. That statement from Kirby Smart coming just a matter of seconds ago in response to obviously everything that's gone on today, starting with the AJC.com report, then the statement from the Athens-Clarke County Police Department that revealed the warrant being issued for Jalen Carter. Now the statement from Kirby Smart. What do you think about those words from Kirby, Mike?
Well, Kirby and crisis management is a big part of the job when you're a head football coach and you're responsible for over 100 young men. And there's going to be things that happen off the field. And quite frankly, one of the more troubling aspects of this to me is that these are quote unquote leaders. It's Stetson Bennett being arrested at 6 a.m. It's Jalen Carter that has it's Jamon Dumas Johnson. It's, these are not the figures that you expect. You expect these to be the people to realize and recognize, Brandon, that they represent so much more than themselves, right? So that level of accountability to one another and to the program, this is going to be a big reset for Kirby Smart this offseason. It's going to be very important who he puts in leadership positions, because this is not the type of look that Kirby Smart wants for the Georgia football program. I spoke with Howie Roseman yesterday, the vice president, general manager of the Philadelphia Eagles. We had a DawgNation exclusive with the Super Bowl GM. And he said, look, in Georgia, we know what we're getting. These kids are trained the right way as people and football players. And that is part of the brand. This isn't going to turn into the 1980s Miami Hurricanes under Kirby Smart's watch. It's not going to be an anything goes. I mean, this program is built on discipline and accountability. And these unfortunate off-the-field incidents have shaken the program in the offseason. It's going to be harder than ever for the Georgia Bulldogs this offseason. I can assure you, just knowing how Kirby Smart is. And I think you remember, Brandon, it was just, well, my goodness, what was it, 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, when Georgia had 6 players arrested in 6 weeks. They weren't the most serious of charges, but it was a pattern that was playing out over the spring. And it got to the point where Kirby had people running steps in front of people at the scrimmage. I mean, it was getting that serious where Kirby's going to publicly discipline. And he will do what he needs to do to maintain control and discipline and accountability in this program. This whole celebration just completely, to me, spiraled out of control. Unfortunately, in the aftermath, I think this is probably a cautionary tale. Don't think you're going to see another occasion like this. A school do this. There's a lot of things that happen around these situations, circumstances. And, Georgia fans are going to be ready for some good news here in a couple of weeks when they start spring drills. But that statement that you read to me, Brandon, to me, that is a sign that Kirby Smart is putting the foot down, and there's going to be some very harsh talks behind closed doors in those locker rooms, and leadership, and I believe starting positions. There's going to be a much greater, even greater priority placed on putting leaders in positions that will be accountable and that will be disciplined and that will do things right on and off the field. So read into that what you want, but I think character is going to count more than ever in addition to the talent. And I expect we're going to see Kirby Smart with some very strong words once spring drills start here in just a couple weeks.
All right, Mike, thanks for joining us here today, and we'll continue to read your combine coverage there from Indianapolis and, of course, talk to you back here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management again very soon there as well.
All right. Look forward to it, Brandon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. And, look, I'm going to be serious here just for a second. I told you before that when it comes to the stuff that's kind of coming out about Jalen Carter today, starting with the AJC.com story, the facts that they report, the statement released by the Athens-Clarke County Police Department, I am mostly content to sort of let this all play out the same way I've been mostly content to let this play out from the beginning. I will say this, this is just, I gave an opinion earlier, I'll give another opinion now and sort of let that be the end of my, opining on this. I think Georgia needs to tighten up here a little bit. There is a look of a little bit of sloppiness here. And ultimately, how much does bad PR matter? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I mean, obviously, the loss of life is far more serious than bad public relations. But the AJC doing a story, the Athens-Clarke County Police Department giving an arrest warrant, Kirby issuing a statement, that's the wrong order. That's not the right order for this stuff to take place. I love Georgia football. I want to see them win games. It's my favorite pastime. Georgia needs to tighten up here just a little bit. Just a little bit. The sort of be quiet, hope all this goes away, that's not a strategy. And as I said before, you have a legal right to remain silent. You don't have an obligation to remain silent. And so if I'm Georgia, the next piece of bad news related to this, I don't think it should come out in the press because that strategy is right now not working for UGA. And that's as close as an opinion as I want to give you. As someone who loves Georgia football, I'd like to see Georgia tighten up a little bit on this. I would. And that's my only opinion. All right, so let us dive in here and get a few more comments, and then we'll get ready to move on after that. Foster Moss says they need to tighten up a lot. Yeah, I mean, this is serious. This is serious. And I don't know how serious it is. I really don't because I'm not smart enough to know that necessarily. And I don't know what all this means and where it's all going from here. But this is serious. And it's serious. It just is. And look, we're a show that's about having fun, and we try to make everything as fun as we possibly can. But that doesn't mean we're going to pretend something isn't serious when it is, and this kind of is. All right, so we'll kind of do that, and we'll also try to mix in some other stuff there too, and then get ready to get off the air after that. Let me go back to DawgNation.com for a minute. Let's see what else. Good Time Dog asked about the idea of street racing. So I will tell you is that, and in the Atlanta area, it's just a big deal. I mean, it's a very hot topic for a lot of people right now. I don't know if it's kind of brought on by I don't know, but it's this is not the only area in which that kind of thing is being discussed. DT, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate that. Let's see what else. Richard Dees asked about the timing of the police department statement. I'm not going to speculate about the timing about that, but to me, what's more troubling for the independence of the investigation is the fact that it comes out after the AJC story, not that it comes out right before the combine. And like I said, I'm not qualified to speculate too much on that, but my read on the timing is all of this just sort of a, CYA thing on the part of the, everybody involved because, the AJC reported what it reported. That's what would be more concerning to me. But as I said before, I just can't, I can't do too much, speculating, but I don't know, man. This is just a little bit sloppy, and it may be more than a little bit sloppy. And I'm not going to pretend that it's not just because we all like Georgia football. Let's see what else. Over here on Facebook for a moment, I apologize for not having been to Facebook for comments. And if you want to talk about something different, we can do that too. I'm certainly not demanding this be all Carter all the time. Not demanding that. Let's see what else. Yeah, so they're talking about the Kirby statement. We did read that a moment ago. So that just came out and we read it to Mike. So hopefully y'all got that when I read that. Let's see what else. I'm going to change the subject just for a moment. Just I don't know, kind of bring some levity back into this. Ken Holcomb says that at the NFL level, Stetson Bennett may be surrounded by, obviously good NFL level players. He says, I think if Bennett's given the chance, he'll buck up and prove the naysayers wrong again. The young man has the it factor, and the prototypical prime quarterback many times don't have it. So Ken obviously is throwing his support for Stetson Bennett. Here's what I will tell you. Like, Bennett may already be the greatest story of all time, but if he goes on to have also NFL success on the heels of the college success that at every step of the way people told him, including his own coaches, by the way, that he wasn't capable of providing, then that is like that's just hands down. That is the stuff of a movie at that point in time, for sure. Jeff Ingram says, when you're top notch, you have to be beyond reproach. The way it's being slow walked, there was more bad news coming. Thank you for saying we need to tighten it up. I think Kirby, I don't know what it all means, but I mean, like, if you follow politics at all, and realize that's kind of a loaded word. Like, the worst thing in the world is sort of a trickle of news. Like, trickles of news don't serve anybody well. And so, Georgia does not have an obligation to stay quiet about this. They have the freedom to, but they don't have an obligation to. And so, if bad PR matters at all, it's at least frustrating for those of us, who are, somewhat, connected to this. It'd be kind of nice to see them just sort of tighten up a little bit. David Hogue says, no, I'm sorry. Who said this? Oh, yeah, Barry Watkins says Bennett's not going to be drafted, but he is going to be picked up by Baltimore. So that might be the biggest upset of all, because, we're sort of led to believe that maybe Don Monken and Stetson Bennett didn't always have the world's best relationship. So much so that Buster Faulkner was kind of like the intermediary there, that he was the go-between. So I don't know that if Monken is going to be, and I say this half kiddingly, but I don't know if Monken's going to be, dying to get into this, back in the Stetson Bennett business. But that is what RG3 said. And RG3, I guess, goes on TV. One of those wire type things reported this, that RG3 went on TV and said that he thinks the Ravens will draft Stetson Bennett. And what it kind of got me thinking is, do y'all remember September of 2021 when Bennett lit up UAB? And on that broadcast that day, RG3 was doing the game, and he said that Georgia had a quarterback controversy. And that was like a big thing on the internet for like 24 to 48 hours. The fact that RG3 had such a misread of the Georgia situation to call it a quarterback controversy. Georgia fans really went after him on social media, really went after him pretty heavy. And like, here we are 2 years later, RG3 actually seems like the smart one on that. Now, RG3 also picked TC to win the national championship, I think. So let's not fall all over ourselves patting him on the back. But nonetheless, one of his predictions on Stetson Bennett has turned out to be true before. All right, final comments. Ricky Beasley says Kirby needs to throw a net around this and be 100% honest, holding nothing back. They are young men that make mistakes, but Kirby's the leader. Yeah, and look, I don't know, and I don't have any reason to believe there's anything like, especially nefarious at the heart of all this or anything like that. I don't. But it was a fatal car accident. That is really serious. And people are going to ask uncomfortable questions around a fatal car accident. Have you ever been involved in any kind of thing like that on the highway? They shut down the highway. They investigate it for hours, right? It's like, everything is uncovered, investigated when it comes to a fatal car accident. This was always bound to happen. And, I don't know. I probably said more than I should. Let us go back to DawgNation.com. Dogs on Top says, thanks for being honest. When Georgia does something great, it should be celebrated. When they are less than perfect, that should be addressed also. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the way that I view things. I mean, obviously, I'm a big Georgia fan. This is a Georgia show, and luckily for us who like Georgia, the news around UGA is mostly good, and so it's really, really fun to do a show like this on most days because we actually follow a program that's involved in lots of really, really good things. But like, I couldn't live with myself if I wasn't honest with you all, and I'm going to always have to be as honest as I possibly can be. Let's see what else. Ron Scroggy 85 also kind of pointing out a really nice video that Georgia did the other day, kind of looking at some of the history of the Athens community as it relates to Black History Month, and I thought that was really well done by Georgia. That's a really good point. Really good point. And all right, final comments over here, and then we're going to be done for today. Let's see what else. Greg Rosenberg, I'm sorry for your loss. I mean, motorized vehicles are this is one of those things where you sort of sound like the old man on the porch when you say this, but motorized vehicles are they just need to be taken seriously. They just do. And I know how cool it is to have a car that goes really fast or a motorcycle. I realize how cool that is. I mean, it is cool. It just never stops being cool. Every generation that's been cool. Every generation from here on out, it will be cool. It's a cool thing to have a fast car. It just is. And that's one of those things that defies explanation. It doesn't require explanation. It just is. Fast cars are just cool. They always will be. And yet, they also are very much worthy of respect because I don't care how nice they make them these days, a fast automobile is still dangerous. It is. And I hate to sound like, your dad, but that's just kind of what the truth is. And listen, I'm not someone who is, by the way, I guess blameless in this regard either. Now, thankfully, it wasn't a serious accident, but I got a ticket one time for going very fast. So, even when I was younger, I'm not kind of blameless in all this, although my situation, not similar to this necessarily. Let us get ready to go. Anything else on a different topic before we leave? All right. We're going to go for now. Hey, thanks for being here, y'all. We'll come back and hopefully do some different stuff tomorrow. Y'all check out our friends at RS Andrews online, rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. You can trust them and all that. Get that air conditioning unit ready to go. Tune back up to factory fresh specs, keeping you nice and cool here coming up. That is what RS Andrews is all about. So find them online, rsandrews.com. We'll see you back here tomorrow for DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management. We will look forward to talking to you then.